My business partner stole my $2 million idea. This is a sentence I never imagined I'd say when I founded BioSolutions 7 years ago. My name is Francine Lawson, Frankie to my friends, and at 53, with a PhD in biomedical engineering and 3 decades of experience developing medical devices, I should be reaping the rewards of a brilliant career. Instead, I found myself fighting for the very invention that could transform millions of lives. I've always been fascinated by how things work. As a child, much to my parents' dismay, I would take apart household appliances just to understand their inner workings. That innate curiosity carried me from a small town in the Midwest to a PhD at MIT, and eventually led me to launch my own medical tech company. The road wasn't easy. While building my career, I also raised 2 children, survived a tough divorce at 45, and faced the constant, subtle bias that shadows women in male-dominated fields. For every promotion, I had to work twice as hard. For every idea accepted, I had to defend it 3 times more than my male colleagues. When I finally gathered the courage and capital to start my own company, I knew I needed a partner. Someone who could complement my technical expertise with business savvy and fundraising skills. Wesley Hammond seemed like the perfect fit, Harvard-educated, charismatic, with a strong track record in medical startups and an enviable network. "We're going to change the world together, Frankie," he said during our first meeting, his confident smile filling me with hope. "You invent the breakthroughs, I'll turn them into life-changing products." And for 6 years, it worked. We developed small and mid-scale medical devices that, while not revolutionary, provided a healthy cash flow and built our reputation in the industry. Our partnership had a natural rhythm. I led research and oversaw the technical team, while Wesley charmed investors and maneuvered through the complex world of medical marketing. BioSolutions grew from a tiny office with 3 employees to a respected company with 87 staff members and facilities in 2 states. I finally felt I had found my place, a space where I could create freely, knowing my innovations would be valued and brought to life. Then came the night that changed everything. It was about 18 months ago. I woke up suddenly at 3:14 a.m., my mind racing with the solution to a problem I had been trying to solve for years. A truly non-invasive method for continuous blood glucose monitoring. Diabetes affects over 37 million Americans, with healthcare costs exceeding $327 billion annually. Most existing monitoring systems still require some degree of invasiveness, either through tiny needles or sensors implanted under the skin. The few non-invasive methods out there struggle with issues of accuracy and reliability. My epiphany. That night combined advanced spectroscopy with machine learning algorithms I had been quietly developing for years. The device, which I mentally named GlucoWatch, would be as discreet as an ordinary wristwatch, requiring no skin puncture, with unprecedented accuracy. Even more revolutionary, it could detect prediabetes patterns years before traditional methods, potentially preventing millions from developing full-blown disease. Market studies estimated that a device with these capabilities would be worth between $1.5 and $2 billion globally. I didn't go back to sleep that night. I drove to the lab at 4:30 a.m. and began working feverishly, documenting every aspect of the idea before a single detail could slip away. Over the following months, I practically lived in the lab, often sleeping on the small couch in my office, consumed by the determination to turn the concept into reality. Diana Reynolds, our quiet 44-year-old IT specialist, noticed my constant presence and gradually became my closest ally on the project. Technically brilliant and with a sharp eye for detail, Diana helped with the complex programming required for the machine learning algorithms. "Why all the secrecy?" she asked one night as we worked late. "It's not exactly secrecy," I replied, adjusting a parameter on the prototype. "I just prefer to present concrete results before creating any expectations." The truth I didn't admit was more complicated. Years in the industry had taught me to protect my ideas until they were fully formed. As a woman, especially, one over 50, I knew how easily credit could be redirected, how contributions could be minimized, how the phrase, "it was a team effort," often erased the work of individual minds, especially when those minds belonged to women. When the prototype finally worked in preliminary tests, the thrill was indescribable. The device measured glucose levels with 97.8% accuracy compared to standard invasive methods, without drawing a single drop of blood. Teresa Martinez, my best Friend of 20 years and an attorney specializing in intellectual property, was the first person outside the company I confided in. "This is revolutionary, Frankie," she said after my demonstration in her office. "We need to protect this immediately. Who else knows?" "Only Diana, so far." "And Wesley?" I hesitated. "Not yet. I wanted to make sure it worked before sharing it." Teresa studied me over her reading glasses. "Including Wesley? Especially Wesley," she emphasized. "Something this valuable brings out the worst in people." I dismissed her concern. Wesley had been my business partner for 7 years. We had built biosolutions together from the ground up. Surely our partnership meant more than any industry trend Teresa had seen in her long career dealing with intellectual property disputes. "I'll tell him tomorrow," I decided. "It's time to plan our next steps." I scheduled a private meeting with Wesley for the next morning, feeling that blend of pride and anticipation that only true creators understand. After years of work and personal sacrifice, I had created something that could genuinely change the world, and I couldn't wait to share that achievement with my partner and friend. I had no idea that meeting would mark the beginning of the end of our partnership, and nearly the end of my career. The next morning, I sat in Wesley's office with the discreet prototype in my hand, ready to unveil what could be the biggest breakthrough in diabetes monitoring in decades. His curious gaze shifted into pure shock once he fully understood what I had created. "You'll never prove anything," were the words he would eventually use when he tried to steal my work. Words I never imagined I'd hear from my partner of 7 years. Words he would deeply regret saying, because what Wesley Hammond didn't know, as he plotted his betrayal, was that I had installed discrete security cameras in the lab years ago. He forgot about the cameras, and that forgetfulness changed everything. Wesley's expression when I demonstrated the working prototype was unforgettable, a mix of shock, admiration, and something else I didn't immediately recognize. His eyes widened as the glucowatch accurately measured his glucose levels without a single prick, without discomfort, with nothing but skin contact. "Frankie, this is revolutionary," he murmured, examining the compact device with an almost religious reverence. "How long have you been working on this?" "Nearly a year in active development, but I've been refining the theory for much longer," I replied, allowing myself to finally feel genuine pride in what I'd built. "There are still adjustments to make, but the preliminary results are outstanding." Wesley asked dozens of questions about how it worked, market potential, production costs. His enthusiasm felt authentic and contagious. For the first time in months, I let myself fully relax. This was the partnership I valued, the dynamic that had made biosolutions successful, my technical innovation paired with his business vision. "We need to begin the patent process immediately," I said, already visualizing our next moves. "Teresa is preparing the preliminary documentation." "Absolutely," Wesley agreed, still examining the device. "But let's keep this under strict secrecy for now. Something this big. Well, it'll attract a lot of attention. We need to be strategic." I left that meeting with a renewed sense of optimism, convinced that our company was about to reach a new level. As I walked back to the lab, I didn't realize that what I had read as admiration in Wesley's eyes was, in truth, something far more dangerous: greed. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle changes in Wesley's behavior. Normally, he delegated all technical matters, but now he became surprisingly involved in the GlucoWatch project. He started attending technical team meetings he used to consider too detailed. He insisted on understanding every aspect of the device's function, requesting copies of preliminary schematics for potential investor presentations. At first, I took it as genuine enthusiasm. Finally, I thought, Wesley was embracing the technical side of our partnership, recognizing the importance of fully understanding such a significant innovation. Diana was the first to notice something odd. One Wednesday, as we calibrated sensors, she casually mentioned, "He was in the lab last night, after everyone left." "Wesley?" I asked, surprised. My partner rarely stepped into the lab without a specific reason, and certainly never after hours. Diana nodded without lifting her eyes from the equipment. Around 10:30 p.m., he seemed to be copying files from the main research server. "Well, he's an equal partner," I replied automatically, ignoring the slight discomfort the information stirred. He has every right to access the project files. Diana just shrugged, but I noticed a tension in her posture that didn't match her usual reserved demeanor. Other signs began to show gradually. Last-minute canceled meetings, phone calls that abruptly ended when I entered his office, and an increasing insistence that we simplify the patent documentation, removing technical details I considered essential. This is all too technical for investors, he argued during a review of the preliminary documents. Let's focus on the commercial benefits, not the implementation details. The implementation details are what make the Gluco watch patentable, I countered. Without them, we're just describing a concept, not an invention. Wesley backed down in that moment, but the discussion left a bitter taste. For the first time in our partnership, I felt we were working with conflicting goals, not complementary ones. My daughter Jessica, freshly graduated in business law and always attuned to power dynamics, noticed my concern during our weekly dinner. "Something's bothering you, Mom?" she said as we shared a pizza in my apartment. "Problems with the new device?" "Not with the device itself," I admitted, hesitant to voice suspicions that still felt unfair. "It's more of a feeling." Jessica leaned forward, her analytical gaze, so much like mine, fixed on my face. "What kind of feeling?" "Like..." I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Like Wesley's been acting differently since I showed him the Gluco watch. More involved, but also more secretive." "You documented the entire development, right?" Jessica asked, immediately switching into lawyer mode. "Dated lab notebooks, digital records, witnesses?" "Of course," I replied, almost offended by the question. "I have meticulous documentation of every step, from the initial concept to the current prototype. Keep copies outside the office," Jessica advised, her expression serious. "I'd rather be paranoid than see you lose credit for your work." Although part of me thought Jessica was being overly cautious, perhaps influenced by cases she studied in law school, I followed her advice. That very night, I scanned my lab notebooks and saved copies to a secure drive disconnected from the company's network. Just as a precaution, I told myself as I archived the documents. Wesley is my partner, not my adversary. A week later, the bomb dropped. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that would normally fade from memory. I was in the lab finishing durability tests when Wesley appeared at the door, not alone, but accompanied by his brother, Victor Hammond, a corporate attorney who rarely visited our facilities. "Can we talk in your office?" Wesley asked, his tone formally cordial in a way that immediately set off internal alarms. On the short walk to my office, my mind raced through possible reasons for this unexpected visit. Maybe an important investor? Intellectual property issues requiring legal expertise? Victor's presence suggested something officially significant. As soon as they closed the office door behind them, Wesley placed a folder on my desk with a deliberately casual motion. "We need to discuss the glucose monitoring project," he began, his voice strangely detached. "There have been some developments." I opened the folder and found an official document, a patent filing notice, but not under biosolutions, as I had expected. The document listed Meditech Innovations as the applicant, with Wesley, Hammond as the sole and primary inventor. My stomach dropped as my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Just a strategic reorganization," Wesley explained with false nonchalance, as if he were discussing a change in supplier or an equipment upgrade. "I created a separate entity for this specific project. It maximizes our fundraising potential and reduces risk for biosolutions." "Without consulting me?" My voice gained strength with rising indignation. "And why is your name listed as the inventor? This is my project, my research." Wesley smiled, that charming smile that had won over so many investors over the years. But now, for the first time, I saw the calculating coldness behind it. "There's a problem with that statement, Frankie," he replied smoothly. "You developed this using company resources during business hours. Legally, it belongs to the company, not to you personally. And as CEO..." "We're co-CEOs," I interrupted, feeling my pulse pounding in my temples. Victor, who had been silently observing until now, stepped in with the professional coldness of a predator, sensing its prey was cornered. "Actually," he said, opening his own folder, "if you look at the updated corporate agreement we signed last year during the restructuring, you'll see that Wesley is the CEO and you're the CTO. A small detail, but legally significant. The restructuring. A series of documents Wesley had insisted were mere formalities to satisfy investors, and that I, trusting in our years-long partnership, had signed without close scrutiny. A trap set long before GlucoWatch ever existed. You can't do this," I argued, a wave of nausea rising in my gut. "I have all the lab notebooks, development records, witnesses." Wesley exchanged a glance with Victor before responding, his confidence radiating from someone who believed they had accounted for every possible angle. "Notebooks can be rewritten, digital records can be altered. As for the witnesses," he shrugged indifferently, "who would believe a few lab techs over the word of a CEO? Be reasonable, Frankie. I'm offering you 15% of future royalties, a generous offer given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" The question came out as a low growl, my anger momentarily overriding the shock. Wesley's mask of politeness dropped completely, revealing an expression he had never directed at me in 7 years of partnership. Pure disdain. "Market reality," he said, leaning over my desk and moving closer. "You're brilliant in the lab, Frankie, but investors want strong leadership. A face that inspires confidence." He paused, eyes scanning my face before delivering the final blow. "Frankly, a middle-aged woman isn't exactly what venture capitalists picture when they think of revolutionary innovation." The comment, exposing prejudices he had clearly held for years, should have hurt me. Instead, it crystallized something inside. This wasn't just a disagreement between partners, it was the revelation of who Wesley Hammond truly was. "I'm why. Not accepting your offer," I said calmly, pushing the folder back toward him. My refusal seemed to genuinely surprise him, as if he hadn't even considered I might resist. "Think carefully, Frankie," Victor advised with false concern. "Intellectual. Property battles are long, expensive, and rarely favor the side with fewer resources. I'd rather fight a fair battle than surrender like a coward," I replied, locking eyes with Wesley. Something in my calm seemed to unsettle him for a moment, but he quickly regained his arrogance. "You'll never prove anything," he said, leaning over my desk, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "I've already transferred all the relevant files, rewritten the development documentation, and I have 3 engineers ready to testify that I was the one who contributed the core concept." He straightened up, adjusting his expensive tie as if closing a successful deal. "Be smart for once in your life and take the 15% before I change my mind." As he and Victor walked out of my office, a strange calm settled over me. Not the calm of acceptance, but the crystalline clarity that comes when the path ahead, though difficult, becomes unmistakably clear. Wesley had made a fundamental mistake, the same mistake countless men in positions of power make every day. He drastically underestimated the woman in front of him. What he didn't know, what he could never have suspected, was that I had been waiting for this moment for decades. Not because I specifically distrusted him, but because experience had taught me to always prepare for the worst. He forgot who I was, a woman who built a career in a field that constantly questioned her competence, who survived a devastating divorce, while raising 2 children and working full-time, who had learned the hard way that the world rarely protects those who don't protect themselves. More importantly, he forgot about the cameras. The discrete security cameras I had installed in the lab years ago, long before the company's official security system. Cameras only Diana knew about, programmed to automatically back up footage to an external server that only I could access. Grabbed my phone and sent a message to 3 people, Teresa, Jessica, and Diana. It was time to strike back. "I want that son of a bitch destroyed," declared Teresa Martinez, my best friend and an attorney specializing in intellectual property, as she slammed her fist on my living room table. It had only been 3 hours since my confrontation with Wesley, and already my home had transformed into the command center of a counterattack operation. Teresa had arrived first, armed with a folder of legal documents and a fury she rarely showed outside the courtroom. Jessica, my lawyer daughter, had jumped on a flight from Chicago as soon as she got my message, and Diana had brought her laptop, external hard drives, and what she called her digital survival kit. Legally, we've got several options. Teresa continued, calmer now as she reviewed her notes. But we need to understand exactly what we're up against, what Wesley has already done officially, and what's just a threat. I detailed the meeting. The secret creation of the shell company, Meditech Innovations, the patent documentation already filed, the sneaky change in BioSolutions' corporate structure that had demoted me from co-CEO to CTO without my actual knowledge. That restructuring contract, Mom, Jessica said with a frown as she flipped through the copy I had pulled from my files. Technically, you signed it, but we've got strong arguments to invalidate it based on bad faith and fraudulent representation. Diana, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. Her quiet voice carried a certainty that immediately drew everyone's attention. What matters now isn't the documents Wesley manipulated, but the evidence he doesn't know we have. She connected her laptop to my TV and opened a folder of video files, meticulously organized by date. For 3 years, I've maintained a secondary security system in the main lab and on the servers, she explained. Originally installed by Frankie, but expanded and maintained by me. Discreet. Cameras, audio recording, and most importantly, real-time backups to external servers Wesley doesn't know exist and can't access. The first video she played made my stomach tighten. Wesley, late at night in the lab 2 weeks earlier, methodically copying my files onto an external drive while speaking on the phone. Yes, Victor, I'm copying everything now. His voice was clear in the recording. She has no idea. Keeps everything in old-school notebooks like it's the 90s. It'll be easy to rewrite the development narrative. The second video was even more damning. Wesley in his office with Victor, laughing, as he explained how he'd snatched the old Frankie's work and how I was too naive to properly protect my ideas. She really thinks those outdated lab notebooks mean something, he mocked on the recording. Meanwhile, I just secured our future. The room fell into absolute silence when Diana paused the video. Jessica was the first to react, her usually composed face now flushed with indignation. This is an explicit confession of fraud and misappropriation of intellectual property. He literally incriminated himself on video. Teresa was already scribbling notes furiously. Diana, how many of these recordings do you have? 6 explicit videos where Wesley admits to the theft. Dozens of others showing his actions. And, she smiled subtly, the most valuable, verifiable, chronologically backed up copies of all original files with intact metadata showing creation dates that predate any involvement from him. For the first time since confronting Wesley, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't as powerless as he had assumed. Why are you helping me? I asked Diana, suddenly realizing she had put her own career on the line. Wesley could fire you if he found out. Her usually reserved expression hardened. Because 3 years ago, I proposed a network security system that Wesley dismissed as a woman's overreaction. 2 months later, we lost critical data in a cyber attack that my system would have prevented. He blamed me publicly, nearly destroying my reputation. She paused meaningfully. Let's just say I have my own reasons for making sure people like Wesley don't keep thriving at the expense of competent women. Jessica, always the strategist, brought us back to the practical matter. So we have indisputable evidence. The question is, how do we use it most effectively? Teresa, with decades of experience in intellectual property battles, considered the question carefully. We need to think beyond just winning in court. Wesley has resources, connections. Even with this proof, he could drag out a lawsuit for years, drain your finances, damage your standing in the industry. And while we fight it out legally, the GlucoWatch stays in limbo, I added, thinking of the millions of diabetic patients who could benefit from the technology. We can't let that happen. We need to be strategic, Teresa concluded, her eyes gleaming with the intensity that made her formidable in court. Not just take Wesley down, but do it in a way that protects your reputation, secures your rights to the invention, and ideally, exposes behavior we suspect isn't isolated. Diana, who had been scrolling through files on her laptop, interrupted with another revelation. Speaking of non-isolated behavior, she turned the screen toward us, showing a folder titled Hammond. Pattern. Inside, dozens of emails, documents, and records meticulously organized. I started noticing something odd about 2 years ago, she explained. Allison Reed and Christine Taylor, two brilliant biomedical engineers who left the company abruptly. Officially, they left to pursue other opportunities, but the patterns leading up to their exits were eerily similar. Diana showed us correspondences that revealed a disturbingly familiar pattern. Wesley identified promising projects led by women, waited until they were nearly complete, then swooped in, rewrote the development narrative, and pushed the real inventor out, usually using intimidation tactics much like the ones he'd tried on me. "You're suggesting he's done this before?" I asked, a wave of nausea rising. "I'm almost certain of it," Diana replied. "And if we can prove a pattern, it massively strengthens our case." A thoughtful silence fell over the room as we absorbed the magnitude of what we were facing. Not just a single case of betrayal, but potentially a systematic scheme of intellectual property theft, specifically targeting women in the company. It was Jessica who finally broke the silence, her voice calm but resolute. "We need a plan with multiple fronts: legal, professional, and personal. Over the next 2 hours, we crafted a detailed strategy. First, Diana would create an immutable, digital file with all the evidence, using blockchain technology to establish time-stamped proof and data integrity. This file would be placed in digital escrow with multiple guardians, making it impossible to suppress. Second, Teresa would prepare comprehensive legal documentation, not only to challenge the fraudulent patent and establish my rightful ownership, but also to build a broader case of systematic intellectual property rights violations within biosolutions. Third, and perhaps most crucially, we would reach out to Allison Reed and Christine Taylor to confirm our suspicions and potentially strengthen our case with additional testimonies. Finally, I would act as if nothing had changed, returning to the office, continuing seemingly unrelated research, even pretending to consider Wesley's offer, all to buy time while our counterattack took shape. "He thinks you're defeated," Jessica observed, always perceptive. "Use that. Let him believe he's won, that he's just negotiating the terms of your surrender." When the meeting finally ended, it was past midnight. Teresa and Diana left, with clearly defined tasks, leaving me alone with Jessica. My daughter, usually so strong and composed, surprised me by hugging me tightly. "He's not going to win, Mom," she whispered with conviction. "Not after everything you've built, everything you've sacrificed." That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I mentally replayed the day's events. Wesley's betrayal, after 7 years of partnership, still hurt deeply, but that pain was now laced with something else. A fierce determination. Wesley had made the fatal mistake of believing that I, like so many women before me, would simply accept the injustice. That I would value peace over justice, that I would fear conflict more than the theft of my work. He didn't understand that women like me, who built careers while constantly facing skepticism, who survived being the only woman in rooms full of men who thought they knew better, develop a particular kind of resilience. A quiet, patient, but relentless determination. As I closed my eyes, a phrase from my grandmother, a scientist in an era when women were rarely allowed in laboratories, came to mind. "They expect you to step aside gracefully. Your persistence is your greatest rebellion." Tomorrow, I would return to the office and begin my persistent rebellion. The next morning, I walked into BioSolutions at 8:05, just as I had for the past 7 years. I kept to my usual routine: coffee in the ceramic mug my son had given me, a quick email check, greetings to the arriving team. Nothing in my outward behavior revealed the storm building inside or the meticulous plan already in motion. My first real stop, however, wasn't my office, but Diana's small cubicle in the IT department. We spoke in hushed tones about seemingly routine matters, system updates, security backups. while she discreetly handed me a flash drive containing more evidence she had compiled overnight. "I found something interesting on the old servers," she murmured, pretending to show me a maintenance spreadsheet. "Deleted emails from when Allison Reed left. Wesley isn't as technically savvy as he thinks." Back in my lab, I threw myself into work as if nothing had happened, though I noticed a few curious glances from team members. Rumors were already beginning to circulate, inevitably. Wesley had been seen entering my office with his brother, a lawyer. Raised voices had been heard. Something was going on. Around 11 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Teresa. "Allison Reed agreed to meet us tonight. Her apartment, 7 p.m. Allison Reed had once been one of the most promising biomedical engineers at BioSolutions until her abrupt departure 3 years ago. An expert in drug delivery systems, she had led a project that later became one of the company's most profitable products, though her name never appeared in any promotional material or patent. At the time of her departure, Wesley had said she chose to pursue other interests, and I, overwhelmed with my own projects, accepted his explanation without digging deeper. Now, that failure to investigate weighed heavily on my conscience. Wesley avoided me all day, a tactic that suited our purposes perfectly. We needed time, and his overconfidence was giving us exactly that. Late in the afternoon, I found a surprise in my inbox. A message from Dr. Samuel Chen, my mentor since grad school, and now a respected member of the board that reviews medical patents. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." Sam rarely reached out without a clear reason. I called him immediately from my personal phone, not the company's. "Frankie." His familiar voice carried that paternal tone that always comforted me. "I've heard some troubling rumors. A patent submission for non-invasive glucose monitoring technology from some Meditech Innovations, signed by Wesley Hammond?" My stomach twisted. So Wesley was already moving quickly. "How did you find out, Sam?" "The world of medical IP is small, Frankie, especially when something potentially groundbreaking comes up. I know you've been working on something similar. For years, in fact." I explained the situation succinctly, including the evidence we had gathered. "I suspected something like this," he said after a moment of thoughtful silence. "The submission contains technical flaws that someone with Wesley's experience wouldn't miss, but that contradict his claim of authorship. I'm willing to testify to the technical inconsistency if needed." Another crucial ally. I thanked him profusely, promising to keep him informed. At exactly 7 p.m., I parked in front of the apartment building where Allison Reed now lived, significantly more modest than what an engineer of her caliber could typically afford. Teresa was already waiting for me in the lobby. "She's nervous," she warned as we went up. "Almost canceled twice today. Be gentle." Allison opened the door before we could even knock. She had clearly been watching from the window. The woman who greeted me looked like an aged version of the brilliant engineer I once knew. At 48, she had premature stress lines and a hesitation in her demeanor that hadn't been there before. "Dr. Lawson," she greeted formally, as if we hadn't worked side by side for years. "Please come in." The small apartment was immaculately organized, with technical books and scientific journals neatly stacked on the shelves. A whiteboard on the wall displayed complex equations. Allison was clearly still involved in technical work, even if no longer in the corporate setting she deserved. After the initial pleasantries, Teresa gently steered the conversation toward the real purpose of our visit. "Allison, we believe you may have gone through something similar to what Frankie is currently facing with Wesley Hammond." The name triggered a physical reaction. Allison visibly stiffened, her fingers tightening around the teacup until her knuckles turned white. "I don't know if I can help," she replied, eyes fixed on the floor. "I signed NDAs when I left." "Which were imposed under duress," Teresa interjected softly. "And they don't cover illegal or unethical conduct by the company." For several minutes, Allison resisted, clearly struggling against years of fear. Finally, something seemed to break inside her. "He stole my drug delivery system," she said, her voice low at first but gaining strength as she continued. "The entire concept, the design, even specific phrases I used to describe it. He erased my name from the documents, And when I protested, he threatened that I'd never work in this field again. Once she started talking, the words poured out like a dam breaking. Allison described an eerily familiar scenario, Wesley initially supporting her work, then gradually taking control, rewriting the development narrative, and eventually issuing ultimatums when she tried to defend her intellectual property. Without hard evidence, it was my word against his, she went on, tears now streaming freely. And as a 48-year-old woman in the industry already facing bias, who would believe me over the charming Wesley Hammond? The story doesn't have to repeat itself, Allison, Teresa said, her tone professional yet gentle. We have substantial evidence in Frankie's case. With your testimony, we can establish a pattern of behavior that will strengthen both cases. Allison hesitated, the fear still evident in her eyes. He has connections throughout the industry. He ruined my career once. This time, we're not defenseless, I assured her, reaching for her trembling hand. And we're not alone. After we showed her some of the evidence we had gathered, particularly the incriminating recordings of Wesley, Allison finally agreed to join our cause. Her relief at discovering she wasn't the only victim was almost tangible. When we left her apartment 3 hours later, we had her recorded and documented statement, along with personal files she had secretly kept, including emails where Wesley explicitly threatened her career if she continued making baseless accusations. A win, Teresa remarked as we headed back to the car, but we need more. She was right. What followed was a week of intense investigation, with our small team working tirelessly on multiple fronts. Diana, discreetly navigating the company's servers, uncovered evidence of at least 3 other similar cases over the course of Wesley's career, all involving female engineers, all over the age of 40, all eventually forced out after Wesley took credit for their innovations. Christine Taylor, the second engineer we suspected had been a victim, initially refused to speak with us. But after Allison contacted her directly, she agreed to a brief meeting. Her account, though she still feared legal retaliation, confirmed our suspicions. Same pattern, same tactics, same outcomes. Jessica, using her newly formed contacts in the legal world, uncovered even more disturbing information. Even before biosolutions, Wesley had faced a similar accusation at his previous company. The case had been quietly settled, with the whistleblower silenced by a draconian non-disclosure agreement. Meanwhile, sticking to our plan, I maintained my normal routine at the office, occasionally passing Wesley in the hallways. His behavior oscillated between condescending superiority, clearly believing I was slowly accepting defeat, and cautious watchfulness, as if he suspected a trap. His growing confidence led him to make more mistakes. In a team meeting, he casually announced that he would personally take the lead on the glucose monitoring project, citing his extensive experience in non-invasive technologies, experience that everyone in the room knew he didn't have. More significantly, he had started scheduling meetings with potential investors, including Marcus Bennett, a renowned investor in medical technologies known for funding only truly groundbreaking innovations. It was through Allison, who had contacts within the investment community, that we learned about the major presentation, planned for the Horizon Hotel. Wesley had booked the most prestigious conference room to showcase his revolutionary invention to a select group of investors, with the potential for funding up to $50 million. This information was the catalyst our strategy needed, the perfect moment for a controlled confrontation with influential witnesses present. It's risky, Teresa warned during our final strategy meeting. Exposing Wesley publicly in front of investors could be seen as damaging to the company. The company is already compromised, I argued. BioSolutions was built on principles of integrity and genuine innovation. Wesley has eroded those values. Saving the company means removing him, not protecting him. Our final plan took shape. Diana would prepare a technical presentation containing all the evidence, set to override Wesley's presentation on the room's audiovisual system at the exact moment. Jessica, leveraging connections from a college classmate now working with Marcus Bennett, would gain access to the meeting as a representative of a smaller investment fund. Dr. Chen would attend as an apparently neutral observer, ready to technically validate my authorship. And me? I'd do what Wesley least expected. I'd show up in person at a moment calculated for maximum impact. The night before the confrontation, while we finalized preparations at my home, Diana made a final discovery on the company servers. Wesley had downloaded the entire original technical documentation for the Gluco watch, but had changed almost nothing before submitting it as his own. His overconfidence had made him sloppy. The patent document contained entire sections copied directly from my lab notebooks, including personal notes and references to songs I used to listen to during specific experiments. "This is the final nail in the coffin," Teresa remarked, reviewing the documents. "These personal details create an unmistakable link between his original documents and your lab notebooks." As we got ready to sleep, Diana on the couch, Jessica in the guest room, and Teresa already home preparing for the next day, I felt a strange calm replacing the emotional storm of the past few weeks. "Aren't you nervous?" Jessica asked, watching me methodically organize my folder for the following day. "Strangely, no," I replied. "I've spent my whole life preparing for this moment, even if I didn't know it." "What do you mean?" I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Every time I had to prove my competence in a room full of skeptical men, every time my authority was questioned or my ideas were credited to someone else, every time I was interrupted, underestimated, or ignored, I was learning to document everything, to create indisputable evidence, to protect my work, not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. Jessica smiled, a mix of pride and understanding. "He picked the wrong target." "I'm not a target," I gently corrected her. "I'm an engineer who learned how to predict potential failures and build redundant systems. Wesley is just another flaw in the system that needs to be fixed." That night, I slept deeply for the first time since Wesley had tried to steal my work. Tomorrow would be the day when decades of experience, weeks of meticulous planning, and a lifetime of quiet resilience would converge into one single moment of truth. Wesley Hammond was about to find out exactly who he was dealing with. The Horizon Hotel had an understated elegance in Boston's financial district. Its glass and stone facade reflected the morning light as I parked 2 blocks away, strategically, out of sight of anyone possibly watching the main entrance. I dressed deliberately for the occasion. A tailored navy blue suit I rarely wore in the lab, my hair pulled back into a professional bun, minimal jewelry, the image of quiet competence. On the passenger seat, a briefcase held physical copies of the most critical evidence, a backup in case of any tech failure. "Everything's ready," Diana reported over the phone, her voice carrying the focused calm that had become her default state during our crisis. "I have control of the audio-visual systems in the Meridian room. Jessica's already in position in the lobby, and Dr. Chen will arrive in about 20 minutes. "And Teresa?" I asked, checking my watch. 9:15 a.m. Waiting at the hotel bar with Allison. They'll only enter when you give the signal. Our strategy depended on precise timing. Wesley had arrived at 8 a.m. to set up his presentation and rehearse, ever the perfectionist when it came to public performance. The 5 main investors, including Marcus Bennett, were scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m., with the presentation set to begin at 10:30. Sitting in the car, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The journey that had brought me to this point had been long, decades of hard work, personal sacrifices, and obstacles overcome. Wesley's betrayal, as painful as it was merely the latest in a series of challenges I had faced and conquered. At 9:45, I received confirmation from Jessica. All the investors had arrived early and were already being escorted to the conference room. Wesley, apparently surprised by the unusual punctuality, was rushing through the final preparations. "It's time," I told myself, stepping out of the car and walking purposefully toward the hotel. The elegant lobby was practically empty when I entered except for Jessica, discreetly positioned near the elevators. She met me halfway, handing me a name badge she had prepared. "Marcus Bennett seems impressed so far," she whispered as we walked to the elevator. "Wesley is in full form, confident, charismatic." "Perfect," I replied, a slight smile forming. Overconfidence had always been Wesley's greatest weakness. When the elevator doors opened on the 10th floor, Teresa and Allison Reed were already waiting for us in the hallway, strategically positioned out of view from the conference room. Dr. Chen joined us moments later, his serene expression reflecting the calm of someone who had witnessed countless scientific battles throughout his distinguished career. "Remember the plan," Teresa instructed in a low voice. "Let Wesley get far enough into the presentation to fully commit. Diana is monitoring, and will give the signal at the perfect moment for Frankie to enter." Through the small tablet Diana had prepared, we could watch the inside of the conference room. Wesley, impeccable in his Italian suit, was gesturing animatedly in front of a small group of attentive investors. A large screen behind him displayed the Meditech Innovations logo superimposed on a stylized image of the Gluco watch. "Gentlemen," his voice came through clearly via the microphone Diana had remotely activated. "What I'm about to show you represents not just an incremental step forward, but a complete revolution in diabetes monitoring." For the next few minutes, we watched as Wesley presented, with impressive confidence, concepts and developments that were direct results of my work. He explained the technology with just enough precision to impress non-experts, but avoided technical details that could expose his shallow understanding. Marcus Bennett, a man in his early 50s with the focused intensity typical of successful investors, occasionally asked technical questions that clearly made Wesley uncomfortable, though he deflected them with his usual charm. "The most innovative part," Wesley continued, nearing the climax of his presentation, "is the proprietary algorithm that allows for the analysis of microscopic glucose variations that other sensors simply wouldn't detect." "This is the moment," Jessica whispered, watching the tablet. "He's moving into the part he understands the least." Diana sent the message we had agreed on. "Now." I took a deep breath, centered myself, and calmly walked toward the conference room door. I opened it silently as Wesley continued, completely unaware of my presence. "And the proprietary algorithm is capable of analyzing microscopic variations that other sensors wouldn't detect," he explained, stumbling slightly on the technical terms. "Actually," I interjected, my voice surprisingly steady as I entered the room, "the algorithm uses a dual matrix cross-verification process that I developed specifically to eliminate false positives in low-level detection." Silence followed. Absolute silence. Wesley froze, his expression shifting from confidence to complete shock in a matter of seconds. The investors, immediately sensing something important was happening, straightened in their chairs. "Frankie." Wesley recovered quickly, forcing a cordial smile. "What a pleasant surprise. Gentlemen, this is Francine Lawson, our CTO at BioSolutions. She oversaw some early aspects of the project." "Some aspects?" I repeated calmly, stepping beside him in the center of the room. Interesting way to describe the conception. Development and complete creation of every element of this technology. Wesley forced a laugh. Frankie's always had a unique sense of humor. She contributed some early concepts, of course, as many on our team did. Marcus Bennett leaned forward, his sharp eyes shifting between the two of us. "Dr. Lawson, correct? I believe I read some of your articles on non-invasive monitoring a few years ago. Fascinating work." Before I could respond, the room's audio-visual system suddenly shifted. The sleek presentation by Wesley was replaced by a crisp video of himself in his office, speaking with Victor. "That idiot actually thinks she came up with this on her own," his own voice echoed through the now silent room. "She has no idea I'm filing everything under my name tomorrow." Wesley's face visibly paled. He lunged toward the laptop, trying to stop the playback, but the controls were unresponsive. Diana had taken full remote control. "What is this?" asked Marcus Bennett, his expression hardening. "Mr. Hammond, any explanation?" "Clearly manipulated," Wesley stammered, his usual charm evaporating rapidly. A desperate attempt to... The second recording began automatically, showing Wesley in the lab late at night, explicitly copying my files while speaking on the phone with Victor about how they would rewrite the development history. The conference. Room doors opened again, allowing Teresa, Dr. Chen, and Allison Reed to enter. Taking advantage of the moment of confusion, I proceeded with our strategy. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret interrupting in this way, but I felt compelled to intervene before you were misled into investing based on false premises." My voice, though polite, carried the authority of someone who knows exactly what they're talking about. The device that was just presented is indeed revolutionary, but it was not developed by Wesley Hammond or Meditech Innovations. For the next 15 minutes, I methodically laid out every piece of evidence. My original lab notebooks dated well before Wesley's involvement, digital records with intact metadata, statements from members of the technical team, and the incriminating recordings Diana had compiled. Dr. Chen, a universally respected figure in the industry, stepped forward to technically validate the foundational algorithms. As a specialist in medical monitoring technologies and a member of the Patent Review Board, he formally declared, "I can state unequivocally that these algorithms exhibit a methodological signature consistent with Dr. Lawson's prior work. There is a clear logical progression from her earlier publications to this specific innovation, a progression that would be impossible for someone without her particular research background." Allison Reed then stepped forward, her voice initially hesitant but gaining strength as she spoke. "What you're witnessing today is not an isolated incident," she explained. 3 years ago, Wesley Hammond stole my drug delivery system using identical tactics. He removed my name from the documents, claimed my work as his own, and when I protested, he threatened to destroy my career. Cornered but still trying. To maintain control of the situation, Wesley shifted to veiled threats, his final mistake. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," he said, his tone controlled but barely masking the fury beneath. "I have connections throughout the industry. I'll ruin every one of you if this charade continues." The explicit threat, captured by the still active recording system, provoked genuine shock among the investors. Marcus Bennett, who had remained analytically silent through most of the confrontation, finally stood. "This meeting is over," he announced with undisputed authority. Then, turning directly to me, "Dr. Lawson, I'll be contacting you directly to discuss your device, which clearly deserves the investment we were planning to make." Addressing Wesley, "Mr. Hammond, I strongly suggest you consult a criminal attorney." The investors began gathering their materials and leaving, many casting looks of contempt at Wesley. Once the last of them exited the room, only we remained, Wesley, myself, Teresa, Dr. Chen, and Allison. Diana entered quietly moments later, tablet in hand, confirming that all recordings of the confrontation had been securely saved. Wesley visibly collapsed, his facade of confidence completely shattered. He loosened his tie as if choking, his face shifting between anger and something close to panic. "You don't understand," he murmured, almost pleading. "No one would invest in something created by someone like you. I was doing the company a favor." "Someone like me?" I repeated calmly. "An engineer with 3 decades of experience and 12 previous patents? Or are you referring to a middle-aged woman who doesn't fit your image of an innovator?" His silence was answer enough. "You forgot something fundamental about people like me, Wesley," I concluded as I gathered my things. "We've survived decades in an industry that constantly underestimates our worth. That makes us not just brilliant, but strategically ruthless when necessary." As we headed toward the exit, Teresa leaned in to hand Wesley a formal document. "Official notice contesting the fraudulent patent submission," she explained professionally, "and also a subpoena for the Biosolutions Board of Directors, who will be meeting tomorrow to discuss your removal for breach of fiduciary duty." Wesley, defeated, said nothing. He simply watched in silence as we left the room, leaving him alone with the ruins of his reputation. The impact of the confrontation was immediate and far-reaching. By the end of that day, investors had formally withdrawn any consideration of doing business with Wesley or any company he represented. The next day, the Biosolutions Board convened an emergency meeting where, faced with irrefutable evidence, they voted unanimously to remove Wesley from all positions. The subsequent investigation, conducted by independent auditors, revealed an even broader pattern of misconduct, not just against Allison and me, but at least 3 other women throughout his career. In each case, the method was identical. Identify talented women, usually over 40 and already facing bias in the industry, wait until they develop something valuable, then use intimidation and administrative manipulation to steal their work. Victor Hammond, who had actively assisted his brother's actions, faced his own ethics committee with the Bar Association, ultimately resulting in the temporary suspension of his law license. With Wesley removed and facing multiple lawsuits, I officially took on the role of CEO of Biosolutions. My first order of business: implement strict policies for intellectual property protection and inventor credit for all employees, with special emphasis on transparent documentation and processes designed to safeguard groups historically vulnerable to misappropriation. Diana was promoted to Director of Digital Security, with an expanded budget to implement the systems Wesley had rejected years earlier. Allison Reed accepted my invitation to return as Director of Advanced Research, bringing with her the project she had abandoned after the theft. As for the GlucoWatch, the $50 million funding from Marcus Bennett enabled accelerated development. 6 months later, preliminary clinical trials confirmed its exceptional efficacy. MedTech Monthly featured us on the cover with the headline, "The Non-Invasive Monitoring Revolution: How a Women-Led Team is Transforming Diabetes Treatment." "Did you see this?" Diana asked, walking into my office with the magazine. "They finally got the headline right. Women-led, not just with female participation." "Progress," I replied with a smile. "Slow, but steady." In an unexpected development, other women in the industry began reaching out to me, sharing similar stories of stolen ideas and denied credit. Their experiences, though painful, confirmed a systemic pattern that went far beyond Wesley Hammond or Biosolutions. This led to the formation of WIT, Women in Innovation and Technology, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the intellectual property of underrepresented groups in the tech sector. Using a portion of the GlucoWatch royalties, we established a legal fund to support scientists and engineers facing situations similar to mine. 6 months after the confrontation at the Horizon Hotel, I wrapped up a long day at the office to find Jessica waiting at reception. "I brought something for us to celebrate," she said, revealing a bottle of champagne. "I just saw the news." The news in question: our patent for the GlucoWatch had been officially approved, with my name listed as the lead inventor and a projected market value now at an astonishing $3.5 billion, almost double the original estimate. As we toasted in my new office, overlooking the expanded research campus that would soon house over 200 scientists and engineers, Jessica asked something unexpected. "Did you know the cameras would catch everything? Was it luck or strategy?" I smiled, remembering a detail very few people knew. When we bought this building 8 years ago, the first thing I installed were discrete cameras in the labs and meeting rooms, long before the official security system. Not out of paranoia, but for protection. "Protection from what?" Jessica asked, intrigued. "History! Throughout my career, I've seen countless brilliant women lose credit for their ideas. I swore that would never happen to me." I raised my glass. True innovation isn't just about creating something new. It's about ensuring the truth behind that creation prevails. That night, standing on my balcony looking out over the city lights, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. The device I had envisioned would save countless lives, not only of diabetic patients, but of pre-diabetics, who would never go on to develop the full disease thanks to early detection. Even more meaningful, Wesley's public exposure had sparked a broader conversation about intellectual property and gender equity in the tech industry. 3 major companies in the field had already adopted protocols inspired by our new invention credit protection policies. When my partner tried to steal my $2 million idea by saying I'd never be able to prove anything, he made the same mistake so many men before him have made. He assumed I hadn't kept meticulous records of every step of the process. I said out loud, reflecting. What he didn't know about the cameras was just the tip of the iceberg. The real lesson? Never underestimate a woman who's spent decades having to work twice as hard to earn half the recognition. We don't survive in this industry by chance. We survive because we are not only brilliant, but relentlessly prepared for the moment someone tries to dim our light. And in that quiet moment, with the GlucoWatch securely patented and Biosolutions thriving under new leadership, I allowed myself to feel not just the thrill of victory, but the deep satisfaction of knowing that every obstacle, every fight, every moment of doubt throughout my career had prepared me precisely for this moment. The road was never easy, but the journey, with all its challenges, had been worth every step.